Welcome to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. Join Stewart Heath for down-to-earth conversations with top professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders who have a story to tell. Let's get rolling.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining this episode of the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. I am Stewart Heath, your host. I'm the founder and CEO of Harvard Grace Capital, and we're very blessed today to have BJ Coleman join us. BJ, thank you so much for being here. I really can't wait to get into your story.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stuart. I'm honored to be a part of it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. This is going to be fun. So, BJ, I imagine I always start with this question. Can you tell us about a game-changing moment? Maybe that's more appropriate in your life than any of my other guests, but a game-changing moment that put you on the path to where you are now versus where you thought you were going to be.
Oh, what a great question, Stuart. And I've got many of I call them pivot moments, and it's kind of neat now. And I don't know if you and I have had a chance to talk about this yet, but I've got a book coming out that is going to be published by Forbes. Forbes picked me up about a year and a half ago, and the name of the book is called The Pivot. And it's about being able to face life's challenges and be able to redirect and overcome adversity, whether it be changing a career, whether it be experiencing loss, whether it be trying to recreate your identity from maybe you were at one point a special operator in the military, and now you're trying to reinsert yourself back into society. For me, it was being a professional athlete, thinking life was going to go one way, and then you realize you can't play the children's game forever, and you got to figure out what's next. So I think probably the most earliest defining moment in more of my formative years was when I was at the University of Tennessee. I had the privilege of getting recruited by the great Philip Fulmer and David Cutcliffe, who coached the infamous Peyton Manning. And to be a quarterback growing up and born and raised in the state of Tennessee, there was nothing more of an honor in the game than to have the privilege of getting a scholarship to the University of Tennessee, wearing the orange and white, being able to follow in the footsteps of people like your Heath Schulers and your Condredge Holloways and your Peyton Mannings and T. Martins. And, that was a really neat experience. Well, 2 years into my experience at Tennessee, Coach Fulmer was let go. And you started to watch the transformation from what his coaching staff brought to the table, and that long tenured group of coaches that were bonded, they were family like, and then that new slew of coaches that were to follow, headed up by a coach who's still currently in college football and very, very successful. And you see that a lot.
That started kind of a long dry spell for University of Tennessee, didn't it?
You're exactly right. It for about 10 or 15 years there, you saw Tennessee kind of go through one of those ebbs, if you will, and that's common. You see
valley
that
for them. So yeah.
Yeah, you see that a little bit. So, but for me, I had to make a decision. I said, do I want to look back one day and just say I had the ability to be on the team, but because of the new coaching staff and new kind of the new culture that they were bringing in, I didn't fit it. So do I want to just say that I was there but didn't play, or did I want to try to use my talents on the field? And that's when I had to make a really tough decision and decided to make a transfer. Back when transferring, no transfer portal, you had to sit out a year if you stayed the same level.
No NIL, no transfer portal. It was a very different game.
You got it. So made that jump to Chattanooga, and kind of the rest was history. So that was a huge pivot moment for me.
Any others that you want to share?
Absolutely. So when I made the transition to Chattanooga, had the privilege of kind of being a part of a rebuild. Our slogan for those 3 years was "Restore the Glory." Chattanooga, back in its heyday in the late 70s, early 80s, was an extremely successful Southern Conference football team. Back when the Southern Conference had the likes of Marshall, in it, and your Georgia Southerns and your Appalachian States, who are extremely successful. And then getting to restore that glory and taking it from a team that went 1-11 to a team that ended up, when I graduated, they ended up going on to win 3 consecutive conference championships and go into the playoffs. Was a really cool experience. Got drafted in 2012 by the Green Bay Packers, and the privilege of sitting behind leaders like Charles Woodson, and watching folks like Aaron Rodgers and some really, really strong coaching mentors that really led by example, was really just an experience in itself. Got cut from Green Bay, another pivot. Got picked back up in the Arena Football League to play for the Arizona Rattlers in Phoenix, Arizona, and then finished my career in Canada, up in Saskatchewan, getting to play for the Rough Riders. And then when that ended, it was what's next, what happens now, and you start reaching out to your network, and when having the privilege of being a part of a very select group like the NFL. And then having the even more select group of quarterbacks that have the privilege of playing in the NFL. At the time when I was there, you got to have 2 quarterbacks on your roster, and then you could get one on the practice squad. So if you multiply that out by the 32 teams, you're roughly only looking at about 96 people in the world that got to be a part of that experience. So it's a tight knit group, and it's neat. Anybody who has the privilege of putting on the helmet and the pads and getting to be that play caller, you're used to being in control. You're used to understanding, what the game, throws at you, and being prepared to call an audible and pivot if you need to. So that's exactly what I did. So I tried to find my footing, the first couple of years out of the game, and then found my way into healthcare. And started my journey in 2018 in healthcare. Once I got into healthcare, Stewart, it's real obvious real quick that the intensity and the organization and the discipline and the structure that kind of comes with the game of football or team sports in general was very valuable. It was very valuable. However, not everybody in that world comes from that type of background, and you're used to being a we person. And when you get into, we call it, that general pop or that normal society that's very different than the world that we were a part of. You have a lot more me type people, right? Me versus we. Not that that's bad, but you're focused on self, and there's a lot of good in that too. So learning that cadence was some bit of a challenge, and there's multiple pivots in that cadence itself.
If you don't mind, expand on that challenge, because I really love talking to people who used to be in the military, which I think is very similar to professional sports, obviously different purposes, but it is very much a team activity, and where it is success is everything, excellence is everything, and then you come into Gen Pop, as where it's all woke and DEI these days, and some of that's washing away, it seems. What was that like, adjusting to having colleagues in a business that that are just punching out at 5 o'clock whether the job's done or not? So
yeah, that well said. It's hard. So to kind of expound, I'll go back for a second. So being a part of something like the National Football League, which is probably one of the few, if not the only, a meritocracy type setting where results matter. Like that, at the end of the day, Stewart, like
all that matters.
You produce, or they will find somebody to replace you quickly. Like so I will say there's a sense of urgency and action that comes along with that. And then there's so many subcategories: organization, preparation, discipline. The list goes on. You guys all, integrity. We can go down that list, and you bring that into your new identity that you're trying to create. And I cannot expound on this particular point enough, but it's about rhythm and vibration. And what I mean by that is there is a certain energy that somebody that comes from a team's background with discipline and urgency and action that they bring to the table, that diverse point of view or perspective, if you will, that can scare some folks. To be very clear, I mean, it can really it can offset or be off-putting because it is very there's a high intensity. There is a focus on being the best you can be or the best version of yourself. And not everybody, like you said, is necessarily looking to do that. A lot of folks are looking to exchange what I call exchange time for money. They show up at 9 and they want to punch out at 5, not a minute sooner than 9, not a minute later than 5. And it is simply, we want to come, we want to do that, and then we have other things we want to do outside of work. And that's just very different from a teams guy, whether it's somebody that was in the military or somebody that's an Olympian or somebody that was a part of a large conglomerate like an NFL or a national basketball association. It's a very, very different behavior and culture. So that alone, great question, was extremely difficult at first, but knew immediately that there's a lot of value in this if I wanted to help, guide and coach other former athletes or special forces or military members kind of reinsert themselves back into society like I have. It's a road, there's no doubt, because I call it that fall from grace. When you have the privilege of climbing the mountain and breathing some of that rare air, the fall is a lot further. The fall is a lot further,
Right.
And to get back up, dust yourself off, and to go at it again from a totally different viewpoint can be very, very intimidating and tough. So, for me, it was finding the rhythm. That was one of my first focuses, finding a rhythm, find my team. So I had to find a new team. And that doesn't mean that it can't be folks that are a part of the organization, but I needed other folks that have gone before me. My mentor is 30 years my senior, also a former quarterback who had recreated his identity in the business realm as well. And I asked him, I said, I've been to the NFL once. How do you do the NFL business? And he said, you got to go back to the beginning. Nobody cares that you can throw a ball 70 yards anymore. Nobody cares that you ran out of the tee at Neyland Stadium or that you got to play on the hallowed ground of Lambeau Field. That's really cool, and they're all going to want your stories, but you're going to be the first person. Stuart, you remember when you were in school, and I was never this guy. I'm sure you were. I was never this guy. But you remember that one person in the class that you would take a test, it was a hard test, and they would get a 90 and everybody else got a 60 and they messed up the curve.
Yeah.
We kind of do that.
I was that guy once.
we kind of do that when you get in the teams guys, when they get into that normalcy. We're trying to bring the intensity because we're so results driven. We're looking for outcomes that we can be off rhythm. So finding that rhythm has been my focus.
Well, just looking at your LinkedIn profile and your whole history, after professional sports, there's a brief period of time where you're a broker. And then after that, it's CEO, 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 CEO. I mean, so I have to say some of this experience, you've learned some leadership skills and I get it. Some of these things you've started yourself, I'm guessing. It looks like this most recent one is your own Pivotal Health Partners. And that's okay. Leadership is leadership, whether you started or not. So clearly you've been able to, you found your rhythm and your discipline to translate your drivenness into some business success, it seems.
Absolutely. Super fair. And a leader's a leader, and you can try to tiptoe in the shadows, but no matter what, those folks are going to always rise to the occasion. And I've always wanted to own my own business and start my own entity, and I've had the privilege of doing that now in a space that's very near and dear, which is mental health, behavioral health. Folks struggle, probably, as you've seen, Stewart, more now than ever before.
Oh yeah.
with not just the substance abuse side, but the psychiatric side as well, and that mental wellness side. So privileged to be able to serve.
Just a quick aside, one of the things that I do as a passion, I'm sitting in their offices right now. It's the offices of the Hope Line, a ministry started years ago by Dawson McAllister, and they run a crisis chat service.
Yep.
And we track very diligently all the stats and the suicide interventions that it's just skyrocketed the last 2 years, really since COVID. The mental health crisis, and it is a crisis in this country. It's crazy. So
Yep.
Yeah. So I applaud your focus there. So NFL teams are pretty big organizations, a lot of structure.
Sure.
And I'm sure that was true of the other teams you were on. I don't know about these other companies you've been with, but now you've started a new one. What's that like? I mean, you're going from resources and structure and support to now you're the man.
Yep. So, like I mentioned, always wanted to do this. Another pivot. Let's to be very candid. I don't know if I would have had the ability to do it on my own. I'm not sure where certain folks sit out there with their faith, but God does for those whom can't do for themselves. And this was a great situation for me. This was a situation where at my most recent company prior to Pivotal Health in Alabama, we really were just rocking and rolling and doing fantastic. And I had made my way up to becoming the group CEO over 7 locations and just really, really knocking out of the park in all 3 phases of what I call the game, but of the business. You've got the operational health, the financial health, and the clinical health. You got to have all 3 pillars. No money, no mission. You can't do and help without having the necessary resources. Operational health is having good policy, good procedure, good communication systems, so that from top to bottom, when you're trying to disperse a message, that you're hitting all facets of the entity. And then obviously the clinical health is why people show up at our doors. They're coming to get the help from those who are very, very successful and masterful in the clinical realm of providing the therapy that's needed, providing the programming that is needed for them to get well, and then the resources post discharge so that they can continue to be successful and be a contributing member of society. And then I got a new head coach. So the CEO that was there ended up moving on, and then a new CEO came in, and he wanted to bring his guys, and that happens, and regardless of sometimes the outcome, and it forced me into, okay, if I'm going to do this, let's give it a swing, and we'll see what we've learned. And I started that back in December, and have had the privilege now of being able to get into some other larger hospital systems as a contractor, where my business contracts with their business, and I get to come in and really kind of help stand up their low performing asset. And that's kind of what I've made my hay on, is what they call the struggling or depressed asset that is consistently either hemorrhaging financially, they can't seem to get off the ground clinically, or operationally, they're just not, the right hand's not talking to the left. Whatever one of those 3 issues is, I'm able to come in and really help stand up and support. And it's, Stewart, I tell you, I would have never been able to do it on my own. And now that I'm in it, it would be hard to go back.
Well, I think at this point I've interviewed about 100 entrepreneurs on this podcast, and it seems as though we all have the same story. Well, I had a great job, but I got kicked out of it, so I thought I'd start my own thing. Nobody ever does it on purpose.
Right.
but some of us come to it a little earlier than others, and I myself quit a perfectly good job with a big accounting firm and started to start my own. So I just some of us are just wired for it. But so is Pivotal? Are you in startup phase? Are you operational? Are you a consultancy? Are you going into these hospitals and just taking over their practice? or is it all
Yeah,
the?
great.
So,
No, it's so cool that you ask, and I'm in the process of launching a website too, and we'll talk about that
okay.
towards the end.
All right.
But I really kind of have a kind of wide variety of services right now. I had no clue how quickly this would catch fire, and I've picked up my most recent third contract, and it's funny because they're in three different corners of the United States. I'm in New Jersey, I'm in Arizona, and I'm in Florida, and it's really cool to be able to serve. But I go in right
Southwest
now.
applies to all of those, so you're
That's
good. So,
that's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. But I go in, and right now I'm being asked to be more of a consultant slash hands-on coach mentor. So I've got CEOs that are in seats that I'm coaching how to focus on those three areas I mentioned: operations, clinical, and financial health. And then I've got ones that have no CEO that they need me to go in and act as an interim CEO. I'd love to see how this thing materializes. Who knows? One day there could be depressed assets from more mom and pop type owner entrepreneurs that want to get out from under them. I might have the ability to buy and own, or I can help position for sell and growth M&A. It really has, it's taken off, Stuart. There's not many folks doing it in the space like I'm doing it. And it's kind of neat being a trailblazer. I get kicked in the teeth every day. I will tell you that. And there's always that fear of, and my grandfather was an entrepreneur. Born in Swainsboro, Georgia, and raised his family in a little town called Milledgeville, Georgia, just about 30 miles outside of Macon, South Georgia. And he was a Firestone. He owned a Firestone store and sold tires door to door back in the day. And I remember him telling me, I never knew from day to day if I was going to meet my quota to be able to make sure that I got my $5 a month to be able to put it on the table, for the food on the table, and make sure that I could make ends meet. And then by the end of his lifespan, he was a millionaire. And it was neat to watch how there's those different phases. And I know you could speak to it way better than me as a new entrepreneur over here. You have that fear, like you lay your head down going, okay, where's my next check going to come from, or my next contract going to come from?
entrepreneurial psychology is well documented, and we just learn to live without full nights of sleep. Because the strangest things will wake us up in the middle of the night. Well, what about, something you hadn't even occurred to you during the day, but
Yes, well said.
and it continues even after you're uber successful, and it's just part of it, because the brain is always working, and actually there's actually a large correlation between adult ADD and entrepreneurialism. So I've just me too, and I've just gone, yeah, I've just now said entrepreneurism is just a mental disorder. So it's about half true. So
it is very much so. My mentor, who's fantastic, his name's Tony, and been very successful, and we call it the ice cube brain, the ice cube tray brain, where I've literally got 6 different things going, Stuart. I've got a business that specifically is focused in the real estate realm, and then I've got this one now, and then we do Black Angus and Wagyu beef. We raise Black Angus also, which is fun because I'm a big fan of the gut and health. And I try to tie the mental health in with the physical health. And if I could do anything,
together.
it's the farming component. I love it dearly. And but we talk about that all the time. Just being able to be able to multitask, leave one in a tray and maybe not touch it for 30 days, but come right back, pick up right where we left off. It's a mental illness. It is absolutely.
Yeah, no, it is actually. I consider it to be a rare talent, frankly.
Yes, thank you.
My
Yeah.
wife just stares at me because I can shift from one thing to the next, and without an adjustment period, and we can go on family vacation. I'm doing calls. I'm driving on the interstate, and telling, hey, text this person that you got
Yeah.
3 conversations going on at the same time. So it's just a way of being. I'm not sure. I don't know anything better. So
Same. I love it. I love
um,
it.
so you may have just touched on it. I always like to ask my entrepreneurs and successful executives about their personal finances, and we're not talking about dollar amounts or account numbers.
Sure.
Just what do you do with your investable dollars? And you've just touched on real estate and maybe running a cattle farm, but Are there other things that you do more passively?
Yeah, great question. Obviously, I'm always looking for ways that my money's going to make money for me when I'm sleeping or 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days. I got a great, I'll start here. I got a great team. Like I know that I don't know what I don't know. And I want my dollars to work. So I think the first thing that I did was make sure that I put a good team together of people that were not going to set me up just for short term, but that were going to put me in a really good position for a long term play. So I think
Right.
that's probably one. I play a little bit in the market. Um, I'm not your typical millennial who can speak to you like to the T on crypto. I'm not there yet. I'm not your guy that's going to be
I
able to
don't
tell you.
understand it, so I don't do it. But
I don't either. But there's some of them that are kicking
oh
tail
yeah,
at
I
it.
know. Yeah.
They're kicking tail at it. So I'm not in that. I am very much interested, and I love the plays that are out there right now in real estate. Maybe not so much, single family homes. Or the market's still up, but there are some neat plays out there on the real estate function. And then I love investing in other small businesses as well as you're going to laugh at me here. Junk metals, precious metals. I like to collect on your golds or your silvers and be able to kind of
You've
store it
probably
for a
done pretty
rainy.
well with that this year so far. So
Not bad.
yeah,
Not bad. I'll say
yeah.
it's not been bad. So I play
Something
around in a
something
little
about
bit.
an all-time high here recently. I think I remember.
Maybe a time or two. Maybe a time or two. Maybe who's counting? Who's counting?
I've done
Who's
that a time or two, and like an entrepreneur, I got kind of bored with it, and I just stopped doing it. But
You sound like me. Literally, my folks will be like, "Man, do you just stick with one thing?" I said, "Well, that's not fun. Like, I really do. I get bored. I get really bored."
yeah, yeah, and what's the fun of that? But I mean, so I'm also a CPA, so I've got a good boring side to me. But and at my age, there's nothing boring about recurring cash flow. So
No, sir.
yeah,
No, sir.
so anyway, you want to talk about any of those small businesses, or is that just curious as people see something comes along and you own a comic book store with somebody else or anything like that?
No, like I said, I dabble in the organic meats. I really
Oh yeah,
like
okay.
I really like that lifestyle, to be very frank. I love being out on the farm. It's my sanctuary, and talking about nerding out on my dirt, my worms, my thatch. I mean, how you prepare it for the animals, and just the whole process of what an organic farm looks like versus one that's not, and just the processes. So it's been
Cool.
it's been really neat. I've still got a long way to go. And that's the fun part, is I'm so grateful to be in a position that I'm in now, where I've got a little bit of capital and I'm by no means have I anywhere close to made it, but it's neat to
Yeah.
be able to play the game. Growing up, I was a guy who loved the game Monopoly. I always it's all I wanted to do, and nobody wanted to play because I'd win every. I love it. It was what I love to do.
I
So I
challenge
love
you to a
making money.
game, but I'm going to be the race car. So,
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
but the farming, it's always one of those things. Yeah, I'd like to do that. And one thing I've noticed in the real estate business, I deal with a lot of bankers, and at least in North Alabama, Southern Middle Tennessee, I've just noticed almost all the bankers are also farmers. They're like gentlemen farmers, and it's like they bank 4 days a week, and then on Fridays they say they're going on calls, but they're just really sitting on their tractor
That's
doing
it.
stuff. Yeah, and it is something that can be done, at a few times of the year, depending on what kind of farming you're doing. So,
You bet.
yeah, maybe I'll get there someday. So that does sound fun, and I'd much rather do cattle than I would, I think, row crops or something like that. So
Absolutely.
I would sit
Absolutely.
around all summer worried about them getting enough water. So, but anyway, so thank you for sharing that. Two more questions. So, as a business person and a leader of an organization, what do you do to stay current on top of on top of your industry and on top of organizational, leadership and stuff like that? How do you stay current?
Read. I read. I'm not as much of a researcher as you would think with somebody who has the ADD would be. I'm smart enough to know that that's not my passion, and I've got people that research and that kind of feed me information pretty regularly. But reading is something that was never a passion. I was never good at it. I'm still a very slow reader, but I have found so much solace in reading, and I try to make sure that I stay very up to date with any kind of major changes in the industry. With certain, I mean, you have your certain behavioral health websites and different forums and conferences every year that people are talking to you about the next best thing in healthcare tech or whatnot. I'm not so infatuated with that as much as I am, just seeing, with what leaders are out there, Stewart. I'll be honest. I have found that it's a very small number of people that really run certain industries, and I'm sure it's very similar in all industries.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pretenders, and then there's very few movers. My favorite book is Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, written in 1957. Changed my life when I read it in 2017. Also introduced to me by Tony, my partner on
Did
the
you
farming
like
bit.
the movie?
No, I didn't watch the movie. I
I
didn't
haven't
watch
watched it either, but I am a fan of the book. So,
Oh my gosh, the book is game changer. I read Fountainhead to Follow. Very, 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 very different yet similar type of impact for me on both sides of those, and just learning the societal ways and how things really haven't changed all that much when you're starting to look at movers versus looters and real players versus folks that are kind of the pretenders, and that really sat with me. And you can tell, Stewart, and I know you know this, being an entrepreneur, who can and who can't. It's if you are, and it's quite interesting, and you can't blame the ones who are good at that whole fake it till you make it, because you got to commend them. There's some intelligence in and of itself in that, but those two then typically burn out at some point. But that book changed my life, and I read. I never was that reader, even if it's for 15 minutes a day. I'll tell you the greatest invention. You're going to make fun of me is the Kindle. When I got a Kindle, it changed my life. I can take it on my airplanes.
oh, yeah.
I'm literally home 6 nights a month right now. I mean, that's the hustle I'm trying to put in order to build this thing, and that Kindle goes everywhere with me.
Yeah. I have. I'm a big Audible person.
Oh, it's great.
I've got a lot of windshield time, and so, but just part of, I'm kind of like you, really slow reader, but I can consume a lot auditorially, and so I listen to a lot of stuff. But as soon as I stop and sit down and try to pick up something and read it, I'm out like a light. But okay, last question, BJ. If you were mentoring someone or someone just wanted to follow in your footsteps, what one piece of advice would you give them?
Don't be afraid to make the mistake. I'm a big believer in postponing short-term pleasure for long-term happiness. That does not mean enjoy the little wins along the way. It does not mean that you have to live in a box and eat ramen noodles. But it does mean that right now in society, we have given microphones to certain groups of humans. Microphones can be proverbial, like your Twitters and your Facebooks and your social microphones, if you will. And people kind of adopt this idea of, hey, wait a minute, look at what this person's doing, and how come I don't have that? Or I'm owed this. I speak all the time. I'm grateful. Like I said, when the book comes out, I'm hoping to be able to kind of move into that direction of public speaking. And I talk a lot about, those folks who believe they're owed something, and I'm a big believer in fail, get up, and fail faster. Fail, get up, fail faster, and close the gap. And so me and Tony talk about it all the time. Don't yell at a gap, celebrate it, because now it's kind of that old art in Kung Fu. We talk about, thank you for hitting me because you won't get it again. That you've now shown me my weakness, and now my job is to kind of close that gap. And that's something that so many people are afraid. I call it the Mayweather effect. Floyd, I'm a big boxing fan. I believe in the art. Most everybody goes into like MMA and stuff now, which is so super skillful and tactful and a much probably rougher and tougher sport. But the art of boxing is very special and unique because it's not actually about hurting your opponent. It's about being able to hit your opponent and not get hit, which is an art in and of itself. But Floyd Mayweather, I use this all the time. It's called the Mayweather effect, and the world talks about the ability to be unblemished and undefeated. And I said, that's not real. That's not actual entrepreneurism. That's not actual growth. That's not growth. Growth requires an uncomfortable state, a very uncomfortable state. So failing, getting up and failing faster. So many people are afraid to take the step, afraid to get the blemish. Maybe somebody catches them on film and it's like reputation heck. And I just have never leaned into that. I had a mother and have a mother, but had a mother in a education system for 33 years, and she was a principal and was kind of like I was, kind of taught me how to do a lot of these turnarounds. And she would go to a school, fix it, and they would move her, and never really got to see the fruit. But what she did teach me is if you're a leader and you're a real leader and you're doing your job, it's very lonely. There's a lot of sacrifice, and typically you're not going with societal populace. You're making an unpopular decision a lot of times for the greater good of the whole. Whether people see that or not, that's on them. But that's what it takes to be a true leader, and she could not have nailed that any closer. When you're leading, you have to be willing to make decisions for the greater good of the whole, and that's not always what the populace wants or thinks they want.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. It reminds me of learning to rope cattle when I was a kid, and I had this horse that had its own mind, and I'm 11, 12 years old, and we're in a small ring, and the horse would go this way, and then I would go that way, and next thing I'm on the outside of the ring. I mean, I'm completely off the horse, flown through the air, and my dad, and I'm somewhat bewildered. My dad said, "Go do it again." I'm like,
"That's right."
Supposed to go do that again, but you know what? Then I learned how to move with the horse. I never really got good at roping calves, but part of it was just learning how to ride the stupid horse.
But you're referring to rhythm.
Yes.
It's all about finding rhythm and
Yes.
vibration in this world. And the hardest thing for us humans is adaptation and change, and pivoting requires both. And that rhythm from one world to the next is, I have found, to be the furthest gap or largest gap identified. It's not perceived, it's real. You see how many soldiers come back, athletes get finished, and nobody's clapping for them anymore. Or somebody who used to identify as a doctor, and maybe they had an accident and they can't practice anymore. That identity is lost, and for them to recreate it is twice as hard to build what they already had. And that's the beauty, though, I have found in that fail, get up, fail faster model.
Fail fast, fail forward.
Because it requires rhythm. It requires a new state of learning. So I hope I didn't ramble there. That's great
stuff. That's great stuff. Yeah. It does bring us to the end of our conversation, unfortunately. BJ, thank you so much for spending your time with us. And
absolutely.
If anybody out in the audience wants to be able to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, thank you. I have a website that will be going live here, hopefully in the near future. BJColeman.com. That's the website for Pivotal Health Partners. It's where you'll be able to kind of see any kind of new content that's coming out with my book. That's going to be dropped in August by Forbes. And then to email me directly at bj.coleman, the number 19 at gmail.com.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure those are links in the show notes. Again, thanks for taking the time. And thank you to the audience for taking the time to watch this episode, and be sure to come back and check out another one. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. If you'd like to be a guest, visit growthgraceprosperity.com/guest. We'd love to hear your story.